Hi.
Hello. Hi, Claire.
Hi.
So we're in nature,
We are. We
and
are.
that's really important
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of your practice and
Yeah.
your thinking
Yeah.
and what you respond to. I'd like to start by asking some sort of broader questions about your art practice, where it comes from, your impulses, and a little bit of background to shape some of the things that we can talk about, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Great. Yeah. So, well, I started practicing as an artist. It was about 32 years ago. I mean, I was, went to university and then went straight into having a studio. And I was also meditating at the time. So I'd been meditating for about 32 years or something. And yeah, I've just noticed how the two have woven together. And for many, many years, my practice has been studio based. So I've been in the studio and over the last 10 years or so exploring abstraction. And prior to that, I was looking at the imagination and drawing on archetypes from the Celtic tradition, so ancient European traditions, as well as the Indo-Tibetan tradition. So it's really sort of deeply exploring the mind, really, and patterns of the mind. So it's been studio based. And then, well, since lockdown, actually, the work has gone outside. So I'm now working with plants and the landscape and exploring those same patterns, but in relationship to the natural world.
And with this idea of going out into the landscape, what were you looking for, or what was that encounter? What were you hoping to achieve from that?
Yeah, thanks. So, well, I suppose my fascination with it started in the forest. During lockdown, I was walking a lot in the forest. And what I noticed was that the landscape seemed to have a huge presence. That's how it appeared to me, that there was, it was as if it had consciousness, and I just became really curious about this, fascinated by it actually, and wanted to explore the nature of that. So that's where it started. Yeah.
And so just say something about going back into the studio after that experience. So perhaps you could say something about, were there processes that allowed you to record or to in some way sort of extract things from the natural environment to take back to the studio? Tell us a bit about this sort of inside and outside, public, private.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's developed really over time. Initially, it was as if I was having these encounters with the natural world. Initially, it was with insects.
Right.
Before the trees, it was the insects, and then it was as if then I was making work in the land, but then I would take the memory and work with the memory, the energy of the encounter, and I would just re-evoke that in the studio. So it was as if I was re-participating in it back in the studio. And more recently, it's changed. So this sense of engagement or participation, I've come to realise can actually take place from a distance as well.
Right.
So that's been quite fascinating to explore. Yeah.
Because you do use, you're making paintings, you're making drawings. There's a performative aspect to some degree of some of the works that you've made, but you also rely on certain technologies, photography, sometimes moving image. Just want to get a sense of how you're able to move between those two different worlds if we see it in that way.
Yeah.
And what, visually, what becomes possible from shifting between those two spaces. You talked about
Yeah.
mimicking, but are there things that you're able to bring directly from the landscape into
Yeah.
the studio?
Yeah. Well, sometimes I bring objects.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm actually taking, if I'm working with burnt wood or ash, then I will take these objects back into the studio to work with those. So then it's almost as if the objects themselves are imbibed with the energy of the place. So that's the materials. Or I might take whatever's given in the space, some branches or whatever. Yeah, I think really there isn't a separation between whether you're working with ash or whether you're working with a camera. I think it really is the state of mind that one brings to it that sort of determines the degree to which one is participating in it.
Yeah.
The whole essence of the work is about presence of mind. It's about really being there as fully as possible.
Yeah.
I use various methods for cultivating awareness. So I use meditation, I'll use drumming, I'll use sound, movement, and just looking around the space and sort of really tuning in to the light and the movement and the energy that's there. And
you're describing something there which sort of says something about an amount of time to coalesce or to pick up on some of those things. Tell us a little bit from a sort of detailed point of view about what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Is this something that happens over many hours, or is it something to do with other conditions in the environment which make it quicker to have that kind of response?
Yeah. Well, I mean, prior to going out onto the land, I've often been meditating, quite in a quite focused way for a couple of days. And then, I mean, doing other things as well, but with that as a preparatory thing. And then going out onto the land, it takes, because the canvases are quite big, they're like 2 meters square. So it takes quite a bit of time to set up. So there is this whole process, probably for about an hour, of just taking my trolley across the land and going to the site, unpacking. There's usually 3 trips with the trolley.
Right.
And then unpacking, laying everything out. And so during that process of walking the land, there's an attunement that's taking place. And then also, after I've arrived there, I will, once I'm all set up, I'll probably just lie down. Have a good lie down.
Right. Yeah.
Lie down on the canvas.
Okay.
I'll lie down actually on the linen. So the linen is there, it's 2 meters square. So I'll lie down within it and just rest. But in that resting, I'm tuning into my own energy and the energy of the environment as well. So that's a really, so taking the things out there is like the looking and the seeing and noticing, and then there's that sort of deeper attunement, I suppose, that takes place.
I think that's really interesting to hear, and I think it's important to understand the work, to know that there is this time period before where, one might say a kind of hidden process is happening. Certainly hidden from, which is often the case with artists, the viewer can't see what else is going on normally. They just see the artwork a lot of the time, and there's this process that's gone on which has allowed you to get in the right state of mind and to be able to channel some of that into the production of artwork. There are ways of shutting off the outside world, perhaps, and being able to concentrate. So I think this is interesting and important to know when we're thinking about work, because there are recognizable histories and traditions to this, such as Rothko, for instance. There's lots written around Rothko in relationship to being in that space, looking, getting into the right state of mind before you paint and whilst you paint.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about the
Yeah.
painting practice.
Yeah.
So you're not alone. I think it's because this context is connected to a meditative practice. That's something that the audience for your work need to be aware of or conscious of, that there's a bigger, broader practice here. It's not just a painting practice.
No.
So I mean, the way you said, I was lying down on a 2-meter square canvas.
Yes, yeah.
Tell us about that decision-making process. Why was it not the size of your living room?
Yeah. So, well, for some time I'd been working large. So I'd been working on paper inside my studio on a large scale, working with gesture and mark making. And then I was thinking about scale, and I thought it would be, well, I just brought to mind the image of the Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci. And this was a piece of work that he drew and created in response to Vitruvius's work from antiquity. And that's based on the whole idea of the Hermetic principle, so as above, so below. So there is this idea of all things being connected and all things being sacred, in a sense, that all things have value, let's say, that there isn't this separateness between heaven and earth, in a sense, that we can fully realize sort of beauty and value and love within everything. And of course that's in so many traditions. That idea is in so many traditions, and I was obviously very glad to see it in Leonardo's work. He did have that vision that all things are connected. He was obviously a great lover of nature. So I mapped out my own scale, and the size of the canvases are the same as the Vitruvian scale. So they are the width of my fingertips to my fingertips, and the tops of my fingertips there to the soles of my feet. So that felt significant, and also the fact that it's a whole, it engages the whole body, is like the whole person. So there's this sense of the whole being participating in the landscape, in the experience of making, which of course links very strongly to so many wonderful performance artists like Carolee Schliemann and Marina Abramovich and others. So which I have, a lot of respect for them. So
I'm going to ask a slightly different question in relationship to that. Because to some degree there might be an anticipation, because of some of these structures that you put in place, that the artwork may appear in a certain way or end in a certain way. What's the scope within, when you're in the natural environment, for you to allow different things in? For you to be open to even some relatively incongruous or random things to come in. Tell us about what you feel you might be protecting and where the openness might be.
It's a great question. Well, this comes back again to the whole area of touch and sentience. So my intention is to go out into the land with the qualities of openness, receptivity, with a sense of respect. And then I'm open to whatever wants to be communicated through the encounter. So, and sometimes it's really not what I want. So there have been occasions where, well, on one occasion the tree wanted to communicate to me about impermanence, and I was like, nah, no, I don't want to do that. Can you know, can we can we talk about something else? You know, I was really not wanting to communicate about impermanence. So, and this was a very real experience. You know, this was like I really didn't want to, and for a couple of days I was resisting, and I realised, no, there's no way I can get out of this. That's the communication that's being invited, or that's the communication that's come forward. So here we go. And I did notice that there was a lot of, it involved grieving. Grieving for things that I had lost, and also grieving more generally for, well, it touches on ecological issues as well. But just a sense, and I'm you know, coming to realise obviously that grief is this sort of very beautiful, natural part of life that allows us to cherish and recognise what we value. And impermanence, of course, is also integral to life. So there is this sense of, in answer to your question, I have to allow myself to release preconceived ideas about how the work is going to develop. And I have to release into the experience, the actual communication that's taking place. Ideally without preference, but what I notice, of course, is that there are preferences that come in, and so that's the practice.
Okay, I'm just thinking about outsiders listening to this conversation, and we've spoken before, so there's a certain understanding, and there's a knowledge of the things that your work is connected to. And I just want to dig down a little bit more into this idea of things from a non-human centric point of view.
Okay.
And so, you know, we've spoken before about art practices such as feral practice, Marcus Coates, other artists and people that are connected, where there is a response that's taken that's in relationship to the non-human, and the problems that lie around that. The problems, of course, the straightforward problems around people outside of that field accepting those things as worthwhile or as even possible, such as what you were saying about working with insects or responding to insects. Feral practices work with ants for many years, and foxes.
Yeah.
And then your relationship to this communication with trees.
Yes.
That you just spoke about.
Yeah.
Could you just say something a little bit more about how you arrive at this relationship to a kind of non-human position and a communication beyond the human-centric position?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So, I mean, just coming back to the starting point for the work was that for many years I was practicing in the studio and exploring the nature of the mind, you know, just exploring its patterns, its rhythms. My experience is that things are alive, particularly You know, it started when I was working in the forest in that way, that sense of aliveness. So that's what my experience is telling me. And so the artistic process is a process of exploring that and just seeing, well, if that is the case, then what's the nature of this? So, and I'm entering into it through direct perception, through the perceptual field, which is obviously that's a natural route for me because of the history of meditation practice, which is sort of one of the emphases of meditation practice. But I'm also interested that it links with some significant currents in Western philosophy. So if we look at people like Merleau-Ponty, he was suggesting that we enter into participation, we enter into the flesh of the world, he called it, through direct sensory experience. And he has said that this is a different form of knowing, that we have the reductive mechanistic sciences that are able to measure through logic and the rational mind, but there are other ways of knowing. And yeah, so Merleau-Ponty is a big advocate of this, and of course we have indigenous cultures, we have our own European culture, and most indigenous cultures are working with direct sensory experience, and through that process it's indicated from numerous traditions that cannot have had access with each other, that knowledge arises, that there can be some sense of understanding, which is quite radical to us in the West, because we're so steeped in the rational mind and rational knowledge, scientific knowing. So, I mean, I continue to find it fascinating, and it is a process of exploration rather than, you know, anything else.
Tell us about that in relationship to the process of communication, because you talk about reciprocity, you talk about the process working with giving and receiving, and could you just say something about how that operates, and then what role art practice plays in recording that or being the result of that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, so my approach has been similar to Marcus Coates and feral practice, although there are differences, of course, of engaging directly, and then through direct sensory experience, just aiming to perceive what arises from that. So it could be that there are, that I experience energy, for example, or that my body just wants to start moving in a particular way. The body is registering the whatever's coming through that communication. And that can be, it's quite an interesting process, because it can be very slow and quiet and small, or it can be quite rigorous and noisy. And I've been exploring a lot of the work of Emma McNally. She talks about rhythm and pulsing, and asking the question, well, what is allowed into the drawing? What is allowed into the picture plane? What editing is taking place? What is acceptable? What is unacceptable? So what behaviours, what ideas, what people, what situations are unacceptable? So the aim of the work is to try and allow the integrity of whatever is taking place to take place, unedited. And, you know, my what I'm rooted in, if you like, because I'm not like Jackson Pollock, he goes into a trance with these things. That's what he was doing, is going into a trance, but I'm just really there, just connected in a very simple way to the materials, to my body, to the environment, just trying to connect with as much simplicity as possible, sensory awareness, simplicity, and then there's something takes place, and obviously there's a long tradition, there's a long history of people talking about these things, about the imagination, going back from antiquity through the Renaissance, William Blake, the Romantics, to the present day, and Marcus Coates. He's talking about resonance. He's talking about getting out of the way so that something can come through. There's something that starts to take place when the subject and object dualities start to attenuate, release and soften and open, and one enters into participation. Something else starts to take place. And, I don't have any angle on this. It's just more a case of exploring what that is.
So that's really interesting to hear, and I think I just want to pick up on this. You described different types of practitioners.
Yeah.
There was a term from the 1980s that was often used in art school contexts about truth to materials, often applied to sculptural practices. But I think this idea of absolutely there are artists that don't necessarily feel they have to have an integrity to their material choices and their process choices. They just want to use it. But I imagine there will be certain kinds of processes and materials that you would definitely not use.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't have to list those things now. I suppose I'm just thinking about this sort of bigger picture of the practice, that it is that there is a commonality of decision making and a truth to the decisions that you're making.
Yeah.
Which presumably would also apply. There's certain things you wouldn't do out in nature that may run counter to your opinions or integrity.
Yeah. I suppose it's a sense of empathy, really. That's the that's the heart of it. A kind of a sensitivity. What I wouldn't want to do to a tree, what I wouldn't want to do to another human being, or to the landscape. You know. So it's that sense of, well, it does seem that these things are animate. There is this life there. So let's. There's just a natural response to want to respect that, really. Yeah.
Tell us about, in relationship to that, because of course when we're in a gallery, away from all the research, away from all the development of the work, we're not always given everything when we're looking at the work. And in your case, so for instance, I might ask you a question about the location of where have you gone to instigate this work, in a way, out in the landscape. What have you got to say about those places, the specifics, the reason why you stopped at that point and you didn't walk on further? What were you looking for, or what, given that this kind of conversation often can complement an exhibition. Could you say something about those spaces?
Yeah, sure. So, I first started working in Epping Forest because that was the place that's quite close to where I've been living.
Right.
And And so I was going out into the land and I guess choosing, I was going through quite a traditional method really, from the shamanic tradition of walking the land, and then where that sense of aliveness starts to arise, then spend time there, because there's a sense of, again, as we've been talking about, there's a sense of reciprocity, there's a sense of resonance. So it's a process of trusting that, or at least exploring that, becoming interested in that, and then seeing what emerges from that experience. So I started working in Epping, and then I realised, well, this is a very public space, and there are things I wanted to do that I realised I didn't feel comfortable doing in that landscape. I decided to approach this community, which is a community based in Somerset, and there's a house there where William Wordsworth used to live, and they own the house, and they own this big piece of land. And so I approached them, and they agreed to me returning to the place a number of times. So I've been there over the last year and a half, working in the same piece of landscape. And in that space, I know that it's their land, so it's a safe piece of land, you know, and I feel very free to work there. And it's obviously a very significant piece of land, because I'm walking in the spring, I'm walking and I'm seeing the celandine. And of course, William Wordsworth has written poems. In fact, I think he wrote that poem there about the celandine. So the trees, Dorothy Wordsworth has written a lot about that piece of land.
So it had a certain kind of history that you could connect to, as well as things just on a sort of organic level.
Yeah, that felt significant. And the community as well. It's a creative community, and it's something I felt that would be an interesting dialogue for me to have with them, mutually beneficial, because there's a lot of creative practitioners there. Yeah.
So I think that's really important to know, and I think this idea of where you might be comfortable to work, as opposed to uncomfortable, and you know what that makes possible.
Yeah.
You know, one could argue that an artist working in their studio alone, there is a certain amount of safety and of things that they can do in that environment that maybe are not being looked at or are not being changed by the environment in some way. So I think there's probably an argument that lots of artists require a certain set of conditions in place for creativity to be possible. There are some exceptions. There's lots of exceptions. But I think it's an interesting. I think it connects to some of the things you said earlier on about a sort of state of mind and a leading up to being able to make something.
Yeah, I do though, however, Bob, I am interested in exploring different spaces. Quite close to this particular venue, there is Hinkley Point.
Okay.
So that's a very different landscape, and I've heard from different people who I've heard from different practitioners that their experience of the landscape is very different there to a few miles away from there. So I am interested in exploring different landscapes, so that I'm not, in a way, choosing so much, or there is a sense of not being too selective or too precious, I suppose, about, so long as I have enough resources that I can take into that space for it to be a creative experience, where I can remain present, or I can remain responsive. But you know, at some point I would like
Yeah.
to investigate that further.
I think that's really interesting to hear, and it reminds me of uh, things that are known about Jarman's reason for moving to Dungeness, because of, you know, a little bit like what you were describing, really, about living in the real world somewhat. And I know that certainly for someone like Jarman, the idea that this beautiful, incredible, safe nature is living in a world that is potentially toxic, and is, you know, so the relationship, of course, of Dungeness to the power station there,
Yes.
was something that was very resonant for him in his painting and writing and film, obviously. So I think, rather than this idea that an artist is hoping for a utopian,
Yeah.
I mean, I've had some connection with as you know, perhaps,
Yeah.
of communities and people that have decided to live outside of the mainstream,
Yeah.
and, you know, in communes and certain kinds of communities, some of which have tried to, not all, but some of which have tried to look and put together something which is trying to exclude some of those more problematic things in the world and in nature.
Okay.
But it does seem like some of those aspects are quite important to you to realize, to have the work situated in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, it just links totally to the Hermetic
Yeah.
principle. What is excluded from our care? What is excluded? In what is unsacred? Is there anything that is unsacred? Is there anything that is sort of, yeah, disallowed, that we can't come into relationship with, and with a sense of care? And I think really this is the only way that we are going to find a way through the current circumstances we're in, socially, politically, and ecologically. Obviously, it's an incredible challenge for us, because some of the things that we're facing are devastating.
Related to that, I know you're very interested in Haraway's writing and concepts and ideas, and in particular around mourning.
Yes, that's right.
And I wonder if you could talk about that in relationship to the practice,
Yeah.
but also in relationship to some of the things you were just talking about around ecology and environment, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. So Donna Haraway, she's written a book called Staying with the Trouble. So she's a multi-species feminist and theorist, and I appreciate her work very much. So she comes from the perspective of being with, of rather than denouncing the world in favour of an ideal. So this is exactly what we've just been talking about. She says, I'm not interested in reconciliation or restoration, but I am deeply committed to the more modest possibilities of partial recuperation and getting on together. So I find that quite moving, because it does take, it sort of just seemed to bring us back in, it seems to bring me back into relationship, whereas idealism seems to cut me off from that. So she's talking about crafting conditions for finite flourishing on the earth. So she's definitely got this, well, it's a deeply creative response. And she talks about, the need for mourning as a way of recognizing what we love and what we cherish and what we lose. Loss is is a completely, and we have to face that all the time in our lives. And I've come to realize myself in my own work that what I need is, or what is needed is celebration, a sense of celebration as well. So I've been really enjoying the work of people like Evgeny Emmet and Herman de Vries and Ellie Irons, who are celebrating weeds and celebrating, looking at nature through a different lens, and approaching it in this non-idealistic way, just really approaching it in this cherishing, relishing, celebratory way. For myself, recently I made a piece of work where 7 oak trees had fallen on the piece of land that I work. So most of the trees were over 400 years old. There was a big storm in the winter, and 7 of them had fallen. So that's a big loss for the land. And I did get to see the land recently, and the impact, I mean, it's just extraordinary to see these huge trees just cast over there. But prior to seeing the work, because I had had an injury, I'd also fallen.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So that was an interesting synchronicity. I couldn't actually travel to the site, so I decided to work in my studio and connect with these trees from a distance. And that was a way of cherishing and respecting and just sort of seeing how they were. Not just those trees, but the trees in the surrounding area, just to see how they were after that occurrence. So I went through the usual processes of just setting up the space and then inviting the communication, working with sensory perception and gesture and mark making, using a variety of different materials steeped in the sensory perception, and they were okay. That's what surprised me. I was expecting a mourning situation, that there would be mourning, but there was some of that, and I needed to bear witness to that. And I think it was the community of people who lived on the land who were experiencing that more than the actual trees themselves. But it seemed that there was shock that had taken place. There was shock on the land from the impact probably of the fall. Yeah, I was surprised at that there was actually a sense of well-being on the land despite this. So there's a sense of celebration, I think, but for me, I'd entered into that very much just on the basis of respect and being with, and wanting to contribute something to the situation, contribute a sense of care. But yeah, there have been occasions where the work have taken me into more challenging places, and on one occasion, this was at a similar time to when the dialogue around impermanence was taking place. I also started to experience people coming to mind. So there were people, and I was actually experiencing, I was seeing people in different places at different times. Perhaps at this current time, I don't know. But I was seeing certain things that I wanted to turn towards. I didn't want to turn away. So I was meditating and drawing, and the sights that I was witnessing was of devastation. It was something similar to what's taking place in Gaza. You know, they were sort of bearing witness to something like this. So I do find it interesting that going into this idyllic landscape, it's a very beautiful place that I have been working with no expectation of what the outcome would be, and inviting this dialogue and communication, and then it linking somehow the land, linking me into the world in a more
Mm.
direct way, which has been very challenging and
Yeah.
remains challenging to witness, because it does feel quite direct,
Yeah.
and yet something about the process of making and just the process of caring and the process of turning towards and knowing where my limits are.
Yeah.
That's also
I
important.
mean, I think there's probably quite a lot of artists.
Yeah.
I mean, not all artists perhaps are outwardly sensitive, but perhaps there's an argument that artists are sensitive to things. I mean, I certainly am. You are as well, and I suppose, and there's never been an easy time in history, and artists are always, if they're conscious enough and looking broadly enough, reacting to the wider world, and perhaps things are said to artists about the privilege of being able to make work now that perhaps weren't said many years ago. But the sense that the work is reacting not only to these things which are close by and are maybe more directly understood, but also by things which are happening in war zones and are perhaps more universal. I suppose the question around that is what's the role of the work, do you think, in relationship to the viewer, do you think?
Yeah.
You know, because there are straightforward roles perhaps, or understandings about what artwork's supposed to do. People live with it, for instance, or it makes them feel happy, and those are relatively basic ways of describing that experience.
Yeah.
Either the ownership or the feeling of it. But what do you feel the artwork can do?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Well, I suppose, I mean, I've always had this view that whatever appears on the canvas or the paper is an expression of what's taken place in the artist's experience. So I suppose what I'm wanting to do is to share a deep sense of care and connection, and even for there to be a liberative element to that. We speak about the idea of compassion. Compassion is like a kindness in response to suffering, and compassion is able to lead us out of the suffering. It's something that liberates us from that experience. And this is what I ongoingly find fascinating, is that when awareness, or when presence of mind, when it's linked with a sense of care, when awareness is linked with a sense of care, then it can it can have a freeing and liberative impact upon us. And it does that by itself. We don't have to do anything. We just have to orientate ourselves to those qualities. And that's the art of meditation. That's the art practice that I'm engaged with. So my wish would be for the artwork to be, to have something of the taste of that, something of the taste of a real engagement with life, but also to have this liberative dimension to it, where just awareness itself can do that, and it just feels that I mean, I just find that wondrous, really, just absolutely wondrous, you know, that it can do that. So, and what I mean by that is that it can also be a deeply healing everything. Awareness when conjoined with a sense of care, it can heal the past. I mean, we know this from many of the wisdom traditions and the body traditions, that can happen. So in the work itself, I mean, I am influenced a lot by Chinese and Japanese imagery as well, and the tradition of Chinese and Japanese art. So, I mean, going way back to the 1200s, these ideas were being explored, the ideas of indeterminacy and impermanence, and the first splash ink paintings were made in 1200. So this was like 1,000 years before Jackson Pollock, or so, a long time before Jackson Pollock. So this is amazing. So these ideas were being explored, they've come round again. And in terms of the aesthetic of the work, space and interval is important, so that, okay, there is gesture, there is mark making, and sometimes there's a kind of density to that needs to happen, a density and intensity, a rawness that needs to happen, and that needs to be born within something that is much more spacious, that sort of allows that to take place somehow, so that we aren't compressed by the suffering, so that we can hold it in this much bigger container. And that's what these traditions are referring to, this sense of boundlessness, that the boundlessness of the mind is talked about. Sometimes that's called emptiness, but actually one experiences it more like boundlessness. The mind is expansive, and so it's that can hold the multiplicity, I think. But getting in touch with that takes practice. Obviously we just need to create spaces in our day, and for me, I'm engaging in meditation to encourage that sense of spaciousness.
It's really interesting to hear, and I wanted to ask you a kind of more direct question about what you feel have been the significant shifts, let's say in the last sort of 12 months. Maybe that could be things that you're doing that you've not been doing before, things that you've now set aside, or perhaps it's also a question about how your thinking has shifted. Maybe your priorities have changed.
Can you
say something about that?
I can, yeah. I mean, I think what's naturally arising from this, and again, Merleau-Ponty, the phenomenologist, he talks about how when we engage in participation in this way, that it can deepen our empathy for life. And that is something that's just naturally happening. I'm interested primarily in empathy for all life. I'm interested primarily in a deep sense of care and connectedness for all life. So wherever there is injustice, it's of significance to me. But one, of course, that's arising for me personally is this territory, and also the ecological situation, which is very alive, and quite an art about how to engage with that for us as an international community, how to engage with this. And I think empathy and connection, a sense of connection to what we cherish, I think is a really good starting point there.
When you're talking about that, I'm thinking about some of the material choices that you make as well, because and a word that you've used a few times is permanence, sometimes in the context of some of the things that you've said. But you haven't yet used the word temporality. We have talked about this in the past, actually, but I suppose I'm thinking about the life you just described of the tree, And I visited the oldest tree in the world in Mexico.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it's apparently dying.
Yeah.
And it takes, I don't know, it takes maybe almost 2 minutes to walk around it.
Gosh.
But this idea around a life cycle,
Yeah, yeah.
there are lots of artists, or certainly emerging from the 1960s onwards, interested in making artworks that are temporal, that fade away or wash away or are part of the environment very, very literally. What are your thoughts on that in terms of your own artworks, your own material choices?
Yeah.
You know, the ways in which, even very subtle things, you know, the fact that things get bleached over time, and
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
just your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, I was interested to listen to an interview with Carolee Schliemann recently, and she's really keen on archiving. And she wanted to do that because she wanted to leave a record of, at the time, she was being told that she was a woman, and it was like there was no chance, and that she was just a woman. So she was doing good work, but you know, not to have too high hopes of things. But she just kept documenting things, and she realised, she spoke in this interview, she realised that it was about her just wanting to state what was true, what was the case, just putting, almost like placing her hand on the earth and saying, this happened, and so I feel similarly in a way, that I'm very happy for there to be a record. In fact, I think there's value in that, in durability, yet at the same time, it's completely uncontrollable, so I have to take it all very lightly, you know, in terms of whether it lasts or not. So I feel quite free around whether it lasts or not, but I don't particularly want it not to last. You know, I'm not. That's not what the work is about.